Hello there. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, no matter where you're calling from. It's great to see you in today's call. I'm seeing some familiar names and faces. So if you are back once again for another installment of the Waybook Masterclass series, welcome, welcome. And if this is your first Masterclass series, lovely to meet you. My name's Mike. I'm one of the co-founders here at Waybook. Now, if you've not seen any of our masterclass series before, this is a series of 7 webinars where we're diving deeper into the fundamentals within Waybook to basically make sure that you're the Waybook expert. So, of course, you can turn that chaos into clarity. You can create that single source of truth and get your entire business on the same page. Now, there's a few ways that we like to keep these webinars as engaged as possible. So we of course have the chat. So please feel free to jump in the chat, say hello, tell us where you're calling from. We have the fantastic Elle here from the Waybook side, so she's also in the chat to say hello and answer any thoughts or questions you've got coming up. So feel free to just message in as we go along in today's session. And of course, you can jump into the Q&A section as well if you've got a question that you want me to address throughout today's session. But please don't stay quiet. Keep us engaged and active as you possibly can. So today we are going to be running through basically how Waybook can be the place where your information becomes knowledge. And today we're specifically looking at how you can utilize the context feature within Waybook to really eliminate some of those difficulties of creating the single source of truth. And really a lot of that is rooted on this concept where we've seen in lots of businesses that there's a knowledge drain. And what we mean by knowledge drain is really if you've ever said in your business, we should have written that down, or we thought about this before, or I think we've discussed this, or there is a policy somewhere, that's the knowledge drain. That's basically where you've done the work, you've done the thinking, you've got an idea of how things should be done, but it's not documented, it's not centralized, and it's not available to your team. Now, we see this in stats, both in our research with Waybook users, but also lots of stats by research across Harvard Business Review and many other research firms that basically show that 60% of people delay documentation of the things that they want to actually centralize because they feel like it needs to be perfect. And if you're further in your Waybook journey and you've got the perfect single source of truth, you've probably felt this as well. You've probably already felt that if something's not entirely right, or it's not exactly how it should be, or you don't have the time to make it look nice, then you just put it off and you don't delegate it, you don't document it. And then we also see that 81% of people say that capturing knowledge in real time, so doing a process and building that as you're doing it for the first time, just feels a bit unrealistic because it can often feel like is another job to do when you're busy in your day-to-day work. Now, this does have an impact on us as businesses because it essentially stops us from achieving that single source of truth, which means that it's then harder to speed up our onboarding and we can't really have those smooth handovers, and we can't eliminate those repetitive mistakes that we might see across the team. So why Waybook changes the game, and specifically with context, is because context is a staging area within your Waybook account where we can essentially transform your rough and raw information, ideas, notes, and insights into actionable, centralized, high quality knowledge in a very easy way. So what we're trying to do here is remove the pressure for perfection. We're operating on capturing first and then organizing your knowledge later. And we've done it in a way that means that you can instantly get value. So even before you confirm the right way to do something, you're adding that context via search and ask with your team members to ultimately mean that we can then combine those insights, those files, those logos, those pieces of understanding into your knowledge. Because if your employees are able to capture insights and remove that pressure on perfection, they're more than 4 times likely to do that and create that knowledge-centric culture. So in today's session, what we're going to be covering is how can we capture information in real time with context? How can we then easily organize those files and notes? How can we then turn that information into knowledge in a really easy format? And then actually, what can we do to make sure that this becomes a daily or a weekly activity that us and all of our team members within Waybook can achieve? So I'm mentioning context, and if you're not aware of context, you might be saying, well, what is it? Well, context, as I mentioned before, is that staging area. It's the middle ground before you turn a raw bit of information into a specific knowledge document within your Waybook. It essentially is a personal, flexible space for you to kind of capture and curate that raw information en route to being formalized hard knowledge within the business. Now, this comes in lots of different formats. It can come in the form of notes, so just a couple of bullet points for yourself. It can be any files that you have, perhaps PDFs, old policies, documents, text files, whatever that may be. It might just be ideas that you have. You might just want to put some ideas in and come back data. It might be transcripts from Zoom calls or your Teams chats, or it might be external documents. So if you're working with suppliers that have manufacturing guidelines or how to work with them, or perhaps specifications on products that you're reselling, you can also source the knowledge within them. All of that capture then basically means that it's ready for you to smart convert it into a specific piece of knowledge without you having to overthink this and make lots of time and energy to create the perfect document. Now, we're going to dive in now and we're going to actually have a look at the principle of creating context within your business. And that comes in three different forms. One of them is just adding information into context. Secondly, we're going to look at how we can optimize that so people can have instant access and instantly get that value. And then we're going to see how we can utilize that within the search and the ask. So let's dive in. Once again, if you've got any other thoughts or questions as we go along, please do put them in the chat, and I will kind of adapt and change this as we go. So in order to show you this, I'm just going to dive into example Waybook here. And in this example Waybook, it might look a bit similar to your Waybook, obviously your branding, your logos, your colors. And we know here on the left-hand side is where all of our knowledge lives. So because I'm in reader mode, this basically is the published solid information, the knowledge that lives within our Waybook. And you'll already know that actually if something is in a document, then it is the latest, the most up-to-date, the most correct version of that document. But let's say, for example, there's a piece of information in here that I just don't have. So if I want to know how do I file my, let's say, expenses, there's nothing in this document, nothing in this Waybook about expenses. Or actually, if I want to look at PTO, how can I book paid time off, anything like that, there's just not information in there. Now, of course, because our Waybook isn't going to be 100% complete from day one, and actually we want it to be iterative and changing and growing as the business evolves, we basically can keep an eye on what people are asking for, what they're searching for. And if we go to the reports and the search insights, we can then essentially look at what are the searches people are making where there are no results. So, okay, a few people are looking for PTO and expenses, and there's no results within there. Perhaps people are asking questions in ask and not getting a response. So what we can then do is we can say, do you know what? Let's just answer the question of expenses, and let's answer the question of PTO, and let's answer the question of anything else that people are asking within your Waybook. Now, the one way that you can do that is if you've got a bit of time, you can of course jump in here. We can go to the document suggester and say create a document for, or like create a policy for PTO. And Waybook will look at your existing knowledge. It will decide where that should go. And it says, okay, we're going to put a pay time off policy within policies. And actually, we can add that document in. And once we're in that document, we can then, of course, dive in. We can import the file if you've got a version of it, or we can start writing that from scratch and kind of everything you know in terms of how to create a great document. But let's just say we're not yet ready. We don't quite know what our PTO policy is, or we don't quite know how we manage expenses. And we've got a few ideas, but it's not yet the time to really make that formal document. Well, that's where you can head over into context. So if you go into context, you'll see here, this is an empty document, sorry, an empty context file. So there's no information in here. Now, you'll notice that I can just upload whatever I want within there. So I've got a couple of documents here that might be useful. So perhaps I'm just going to upload the old policy, which is our old work from home policy, because we did do one before COVID, but it's not quite relevant now. We're slightly more remote. We might then also want to import some other files. So let's say a team member's just called me about how to book PTO, and actually they have called me, we've had a bit of a chat about it, and I'm just pulling that transcript and dropping that directly into our context. The other thing that we might do, for example, is let's say I'm having a chat with one of our team members on how we can, I do have an example here, how we can file our expenses. So let's say Liz calls me and she's like, Mike, what can I do with my expenses? And we just have a rough chat. Now I can actually just jump into a note and just paste that transcript in. So we can see here, this is a very rough actual transcript, which I've just pulled from a Zoom recording. But of course you can pull that from Teams chats, whatever that may be. So we're also going to put that into our context. A few other bits that we might want to do is we've got that old work from home policy, but actually I just want to have a bit of a think about the changes that have been made since we've gone more remote. So again, I'm going to open a new note. I'm going to just add these things in. Obviously, I've pasted in here, but we can say, other pieces important to still speak to a team member every day. And I'm just going to keep on adding to these thoughts as I'm moving through. So that essentially here builds up our context. We have some rough, raw, and ready information. Now, as I mentioned originally, this is a private area for our Waybook users. So anybody with edit access has access to the private area within context. And again, you can get to that by the edit tab and into context. But that's really useful for me. So I'm coming into here and I'm going to add some additional notes and whatever else. But let's say we're going to optimize our policy, and I actually want the other admins within the team to be able to contribute to these notes and review the documents I've updated. So I'm just going to take that work from home policy here, which we can just scan and see what it is. Yeah, we've got that old policy in there. I'm actually just going to drag and put that into the admins folder here. So anything within your admins folder basically means that other admins can have access to it. Now, that is access within their context. It's also access from search and also from ask. So if somebody else is contributing to that, I can go back into my private files and I'm going to put in the work from home improvements, we think. Now, I'm not quite ready to share. I don't really want to share the what else have we got in here? I don't really want to share the PTO booking process because it's not quite yet right. But I actually do want to make the expense chat really publicly available. So I'm just going to drag that into everyone. So now, because your readers don't have access to context, they won't be able to come and view it in this format. But let's have a look now at what someone can do if they ask that question about filing their expenses. So I'm going to go back into reader mode now. So we're back exactly where we started before we started uploading our context. And I can jump into here and I can say, how can I claim my expenses? Now we know before there was no information regarding context, regarding your your expenses, and still there isn't any information. But what you will see is that now we have a 1 next to the context. So your users are like, look, there's no firm information, but is there some background knowledge or information that's relevant to me as a user? So if we head into the context here, they will then be able to see that transcript or whatever file you've made available for everybody, or of course for admins. And we can then click into that. We can kind of download that file. But the other thing that you can do, if I just perform that search again, is that the Waybook AI powered ask will also just answer that question because that's now part of the knowledge within the context. So to claim your expenses, you do the Expensify app, you create your account, you upload your receipts, categorize expenses, brief description, and then submit them within 2 weeks. So actually, before we've even formalized that information, if there's relevant scraps around, you put it in context, you make it available to everyone, and then they know it's not formalized, but they're really able to get that context about how things work and as they move forward. So this is the first part of building context. We're basically just dumping files, informations, insights, notes, creating ideas, transcripts, whatever you think is relevant into context. And then we're organizing it by private to you available to admins or available to everyone to make sure that that then triggers and is available in search and ask for the right people. So that is the first step that we're taking. However, I'm just going to jump back into here to look at what are the next steps that we do in order to curate that raw information and then turn it into these smart documents. So now we've got that, we've done these first 3 steps, we now can empower ourselves by smart converting that information. So ultimately, with Smart Convert, we can just turn that raw information into the polished knowledge with just a couple of clicks. So we're going to convert again where information becomes knowledge. We're going to then choose what type of document we want to create from that information, where we want to put it within our Waybook. And then there's a few things that we can do. We can, of course, scan it, confirm the specifics, maybe enable some tests to turn it into training material. And then once we publish it, that is then solid knowledge within our Waybook. So really, teams that document their insights faster. So as soon as we have an idea or a thought, we just put that in. Teams that do that within the first 24 to 48 hours are actually 2 times more likely to retain and reuse that knowledge. You've got to think that ideas and insights are like avocados. We don't want them to go brown. We want to get them into the context as soon as we possibly can. And then it's just stored there in this staging area for us to convert whenever we're ready. So let's jump back into this Waybook account and we can have a look at how we can do that second all-important step of turning that information into knowledge. So I'm back in context, and even though we've made some of that available via search, it's not quite ready. We know that we need a PTO booking process or a policy or an expenses procedure. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to take a look at that Word doc. Okay, this is a very simple chat, but we've pretty much covered some of the fundamentals about how to book PTO, what that may be. So because that contains quite a lot of information, I'm just going to select that document or that file, and then I'm going to convert that one file into a piece of knowledge. So if I can name that whatever. So I'll say PTO policy. And I can now choose what type of document that is. If I leave it on auto, what's going to happen is Waybook will understand the context and it will then understand what is the best piece of information that it can create off the back of that. So it will decide if it should be more of a policy or a procedure or things like that. But you can also then direct the Waybook AI to decide what type of content it is. So let's choose a policy because we know we want this to become a policy. And we can decide where do we want to put that in. So let's put that into the HR policies. Now, when we put convert on here, what Waybook is doing is it's reading those context files. In this example, we've got 1, but of course it can be multiple. And it's then adding that context of your organization based on your AI settings to then generate you out a PTO policy. So this is what has been generated just from that conversation, that raw form conversation that I uploaded into context. So here we've got an introduction to the policy, how we have vacation days, public holidays, what the process is, the notice period, whether you can carry over, the length of vacations, the approval process, and a bit of a conclusion into that. So you can just get a sense there of how powerful that is, that we've turned literally a 3-minute conversation, the raw information, into knowledge. Now it's knowledge, it lives within your Waybook. So it's going to be there forever. We've got that version control, we've got the permissions, we've got everything. But if you want to take that one step further, we can now actually turn that knowledge into training material. And we're going to do that by adding in a test step. So if I add a new test, what Waybook's going to do is either I add the manual questions, but if I generate that with AI, essentially it's then going to read the document, prioritize the most important thing to test the team on, and then generate multiple choice questions based on the information within the document, which of course is based on the information from the raw context that you put in. So you can see here within just a few clicks, we've really created knowledge within your Waybook. And of course, you'll want to add some additional pieces of elements in here. We might want to add in perhaps an image to make it more easy to kind of follow along and understand. You might actually want to add some links to other documents. And of course, you can really optimize this. So for example, we might want to look at this booking checklist and actually add in a checklist. So let's say confirm day and whatever you need. So all of the editing features that are available within Waybook is what we might want to utilize at this step, but you can see how powerful that is to basically get you such a long way in that creation process. So once we're happy with that, we're going to publish that document. Because we've already put it into the HR policies subject, the permissions on it are already set up. So we don't need to think about who should or shouldn't see policies. It's already managed. But we can, of course, decide, okay, we do want to give this access to somebody more specific or remove that. And we can see here that this will notify 4 different groups with 9 members, and 12 members will get access. So that's people who will see it but don't have to stay up to date. So again, we will push publish, and your knowledge has then been confirmed. So people can come in, they'll get notified of that new policy, they'll go through it, mark as complete. And of course, you're tracking the progress, you're assessing test results, you're getting knowledge confirmation as you go along. So that is one of those really great examples of how we can turn raw information into a policy. But it's not just policies. If I head over into the context there, then we can also do that with the expense conversation. So this is just that raw note that I've added in. I'm just looking at the transcript that I had with Liz. I can add any other additional piece of information that's in there. And once I'm happy, I can then, again, select that note, convert that into a file, and I'm going to make this a how to claim expense procedure. So what I'm going to do, let's put that in there, how to claim an expenses procedure. I'm going to make that a procedure, and I'm going to decide, let's just say for now, I'm going to put that into the office and admin subject. Of course, when you're editing documents, you can always drag and drop and move them around afterwards. So again, that's a very stripped back piece of information, but let's look at what we've got. It's structured it into the ways that a good procedure should have. We've got the information on what is claimable. We've got the non-claimable expenses, the common mistakes, how you can, what allowance you've got for meals, and then the specific step-by-step of submitting an expense claim and the additional guidance. Now, because all of that is within one procedure, we can then actually choose to break that down if we wanted to. So let's keep claimable expenses together. I'm going to click on this 6-dot icon and put that, split that step into mistakes to avoid. We're going to have allowances separately, and then we're going to have the process of submitting that claim. And then finally, we might have the kind of additional guidance. Again, within a couple of clicks, we've really elevated that raw and rough information into our knowledge. And then again, with that click of the button, we're going to create a Waybook AI test, and it will then create these. We've got 5 multiple choice questions based on the information within that document. So you've turned the information into knowledge, into training materials with a short conversation and about 4 clicks within your Waybook. So these are some really good examples of how you can actually create that powerful training material and knowledge with almost no input information. But let's go and have a look at one more example. And this is where we might have our old work from home policy that we looked at. So we might have just raw formed everything in that we've previously got. Now, remember, if you want this policy to be exactly the same, then you can actually just import that directly into a document. Putting it into context is because you want to make an amendment, you want to change it, you don't quite know where it's going to be. So let's just have a look. We've got some good information in there, but I've also been building up this note on what we can do from our work from home policy improvement. So we're actually, we're changing how we work our core hours, and we still want people to speak to someone every day, and we want to change how we approve work from home locations. So we'll just add these rough notes in. Now, again, I can now turn this into a piece of knowledge, but instead of just turning 1-to-1, I'm going to say, well, that information is good. I also want it to include this information. And of course, you can select as many context files as you like. So now if I convert this, I can say, let's just have a quick reminder on that. So we've got a work from home policy. I'll create the title for that. Again, we don't need to select policy, but we can if we wanted to. And again, I'm just going to put that into our HR policy documents. So once I then put that into converting, it's now going to understand all of that context, which is available by search already, but we're going to understand that. It's going to look at the notes. It's going to look at how it can make those changes. And instantly, it will now amalgamate all of that knowledge in together. It will create structured step-by-step documents, but sometimes we also might want to split that out and, of course, make sure we're happy with this information, make those amendments. And you'll see here that there is more information in this document than perhaps there was in the previous ones, but that's also because we've pulled from a policy, we've pulled from other insights, and we've amalgamated those together. So there will, of course, be more information because there's more source information as well. The key thing that we have with Waybook Context here is it's actually generating documents from your information. There are, of course, all of the other powerful AI creation tools within Waybook that will generate documents from scratch. So this is particularly useful when you want to have more of an input and build that foundation over time. So again, just for completeness, I'm going to add in a test step within that because I like to have these tests on the end of most of our documents. Because even though we're seeing people are actually looking at the documents, we also want to make sure they fully understand it. And because this is a policy, we have a remote team, and it's quite important that people actually agree to this. We're also going to put a knowledge confirmation step into that. And we'll say, I agree, I acknowledge I've read and understood this document. Let's call that a policy. And we're ready to go. So again, we can submit this. It's already got the permission set up because we've put it in the right location. And there we have it. That policy is available. We have the tests within there. And also we've got the knowledge confirmation so we can actually really make sure that everybody is on the same page. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is your whistle-stop tour, but also everything you need to know about context, because this is a really simple workflow that just provides you with so much power in terms of everything you need to turn information into knowledge, into training material, and keep your team on the same page. Now, the last thing for us to cover is how we can actually utilize this as a workflow to really build this knowledge-centric culture within your team. So there's a few things that we recommend within this, and it's really about building that rhythm of your team into making sure that everybody has a responsibility to contribute to the knowledge of the business. So we're not just building our products and services, but we're building the business as a machine to make it really resilient as we grow. So a few things that we see working really well with other Waybook businesses is if we're starting meetings, perhaps on a particular topic, you can almost say, well, what's been added into context? Or perhaps at the end of a meeting, you can take some notes and just someone take the responsibility to put those notes for things on amendments and changes into your context just as a raw file. You can also, if you want, we see some people scheduling these kind of weekly check-ins or bi-weekly check-ins to review your context. Now, we've seen how you can easily convert those documents into information. So you can actually go back into your context and just delete those raw files out, because once we've got the documented process, the documented policy, we then want to make the amendments and the changes on that Waybook document, because that's where you have the version control, the kind of tracking, the track changes, everything that you need to make sure that your documents stay up to date, compliant, and relevant as you move forward. The other thing that we see working well is just really reinforcing this kind of capturing now and refining later mindset. So instead of saying every day we have to be documenting, it's just what we do. When we do something, we pull the information in, and then we can almost batch create the content to centralize that with the team. And really, that is a way that we can turn this spontaneous conversation and information, those water cooler moments, which are so valuable, capturing them to turn that into knowledge within the business. So really what we've seen is that people that build knowledge in this real time and removing that need for perfection that we spoke about earlier can see 35% faster project turnaround and 28% reduction in kind of repetitive tasks, because we're just constantly iterating this flywheel of how the work is done. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are nearing the end. This is perhaps one of the shortest masterclasses that we've run, but I hope it gives you a really strong indication in terms of how to utilize context for your business. I'm keeping my eyes on both the chat and the Q&A to see if you've got any thoughts or questions, and please do drop that in now. If you've got an idea or a question on how this can be applied to you or your business, then please do that. But whilst I'm doing that, or whilst you're doing that, just as a quick recap, let's just have a quick look at the things we've covered here. We've got capturing knowledge in real time with context, organizing those files and notes with ease, turning that into our kind of smart converted knowledge, and then maintaining that daily knowledge capture to make sure that our team members stay up to date. So looking at the chat there, Morgan, you've got a great question. Can the context feature read JPEGs, and can it convert content from a video? Currently not. However, because you can actually import PDFs, if you've got the document in a PDF, you can pull that in. You can actually store images and videos and things like that within the context, but the AI isn't currently reading that from a file. What we recommend, if you've got a video file, so whether that is a raw video file or on Loom or Zoom or Vimeo or Wistia, in all of these platforms, you can actually just extract the transcript. So you can put the information, the video file in, but if you were to pull the transcript and put that in, then that's a really great way of making that document really readable and really rich. And the way that I would personally do that is you can open a note, you can embed the video, and you just paste the transcript into that note. So it keeps it all nice and neat together. And then, of course, that's something that you can convert into a document as you move forward. So great question there, Morgan. Thank you very much. The last thing that I'll say here is just the next steps that I'd highly recommend people to take. If you've seen this and you're like, Mike, I love it. This is our workflow. Let's get it going. I would just recommend heading into context. As I mentioned, you go to edit, you go to context, and you can just create a note or upload a file and just test it out. Smart convert it into a policy, a procedure, a piece of information, a welcome document, whatever that may be. And then make sure that you're inviting and sharing this with your team members, because the more people that are building context within the business, the richer the knowledge base across your team, and the easier it is to create that single source of truth and moving forward from there. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, thank you all so much for joining us on today's session. If you do have any other thoughts or questions, please do let me know. I will remain on the call for a few more minutes because often a few more questions and Q&A come up. So I'll keep my eyes on that. But without any other questions now, I'd like to thank you all so much for joining. We have one more session in our masterclass series, and that is on how you can create the perfect structure for your business. And that's running same time next Friday. And until then, I hope you have an amazing day, and I look forward to all enjoying some smooth scaling. Have a great one.